Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Spain's daily coronavirus death toll has fallen below 100 with 87 fatalities, taking the toll to over 27,600. This is the first time the country has had under 100 COVID-19 related deaths in 2 months. The Spanish government has also started unwinding its strict lockdown, which was first implemented on 14th of March. This led to a gradual slowing down of daily death rates. But Emergency Health Chief Fernando Simon has cautioned the lower numbers might have been caused by slow reporting of deaths. Meanwhile, doctors have said that they remain concerned about a second wave of the virus. The global COVID-19 death count has crossed 312,000 with over 4.6 million infections. The number of COVID-19 infections in Pakistan has crossed 40,000 after over 1,000 tested positive in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry said 39 more patients have died across the country, taking the toll to 873. The ministry said over 11,000 patients have recovered, while 319 remain critical. It said so far more than 373,000 tests have been conducted, with over 14,000 since yesterday. Meanwhile, the government has announced to open Pak Afghan border at Torkham and Chaman posts. All trucks will be allowed to cross around the clock for 6 days a week while ensuring standard operational procedures. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has condemned India's treatment of Kashmiris in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a tweet, Khan said New Delhi is depriving Kashmiris of their right to self-determination and treating them as less than humans. Prime Minister also said that India is creating grounds for a false flag attack to distract the world from its state-sponsored terrorism. Khan also slammed the Indian occupation forces for using inhumane weapons like pellet guns against women and children. He said imposing an inhumane lockdown deprives Kashmiris of basic necessities like food and medicine. Occupied Kashmir has been reeling under New Delhi's curfew and communications blackout since August last year. Indian forces have martyred 2 more civilians in Doda district of occupied Kashmir. The occupation troops targeted the youths during a cordon and search operation in Gandana area of the district. The Indian troops have martyred 5 Kashmiri civilians in May so far. Meanwhile, the Indian military forced women and children to spend night on road during an operation in Islamabad district. The locals said contingents of Indian army arrived in armored vehicles and forced hundreds out of their houses. They said troops started door-to-door search operation in Mehman Mohalla and Dangarpura, ordering locals to assemble around Lal Chowk. Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani and his political rival Abdullah signed a power-sharing deal after months of political discord. According to the deal, Abdullah will lead the High Council of National Reconciliation with executive authority, while the former chief executive's team will have a 50% share in the cabinet. Abdullah had disputed the results of an election in September and announced the formation of a parallel government earlier this year. The move undermined Ghani's administration at a time when the US was trying to advance a peace process with the Taliban to end the 19-year Afghan war. Discussions over the final sticking points, including the allocation of some key posts, had been underway throughout the day. Officials say a deal between Ghani and Abdullah is crucial to launching peace talks, as Abdullah's camp represents much of the country's northwest. Afghanistan's National Security Council says the Taliban have killed 120 civilians in Ramadan. NSC spokesperson Javed Faisal said 350 others were wounded in attacks by the fighters over the past 3 weeks.
He said there was a 33% increase in such attacks compared with the second week of the holy month. Faisal claimed at least 249 Taliban were killed and 138 wounded by the Afghan security forces in the past week. The Afghan Ministry of Defense said Afghan forces have returned to offensive mode after President Ashraf Ghani's order. The ministry said over the past few days, the forces have managed to conduct a series of powerful attacks on enemy positions. Meanwhile, the Taliban say the group is not instigating terrorism, but preventing it in Afghanistan. In a statement, the fighters said they have been targeted by US and Afghan media without reason or evidence. Discussing the recent terror attacks, the Taliban said they were earmarked despite having denied responsibility from the start. They said there were no greater horrors than the war crimes by US and hundreds of Afghan mercenaries trained by the Americans. The group said it is the only entity which stood against the atrocities of US military.
Israel has sworn in a unity government to end more than a year of political deadlock. Under a power-sharing deal agreed in April, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will serve for another 18 months. Before taking over, his rival Benny Gantz will serve as Deputy Prime Minister. The two leaders have agreed to press ahead with a controversial plan to annex parts of occupied West Bank in violation of international laws. Earlier in his address to the parliament, Netanyahu said that the people wanted unity, and that is what it got. While Gantz said the biggest political crisis in Israel's history is over. Netanyahu, however, still faces a trial starting in a week for alleged corruption. Israeli forces have arrested two Palestinians during a raid in the occupied West Bank. They searched several homes before arresting them. Israeli soldiers stormed the town of Yar Abad near Jenin in the northern West Bank. The locals said Israeli forces fired tear gas canisters and stun grenades during the raid. The Israeli army frequently carries out raids and arrests across the occupied West Bank on the pretext of searching for wanted Palestinians. At least 5,000 Palestinians, including women and children, are currently languishing in Israeli detention centers. Meanwhile, Israeli forces shot and injured a man who crossed the border from Lebanon. The military said the suspect had crossed the border near Mount Dov. International Union for Muslim Scholars have urged the Islamic world to stand against Israel's plans to annex occupied Palestinian territories. Secretary General of the organization, Ali al-Qaradaghi, accused Israel of exploiting the world's preoccupation with the coronavirus pandemic. In a statement, Qaradaghi said Tel Aviv is proceeding with its aggressive policies with the support of the US president. He held the US fully responsible for implications of approving Israeli plans of annexing Jerusalem and other Palestinian lands. He said the organization calls upon all to stand with the Palestinians and their right to self-determination and to liberate their occupied territories. The annexation will take place on July the 1st as agreed between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz. China's ambassador to Israel, Du Wei, has been found dead in his apartment in Tel Aviv. According to initial reports, 57-year-old Du died in his sleep of natural causes. Authorities say they have launched an investigation into the matter, but there is no immediate comment from the Chinese embassy. He was only appointed ambassador in February, having previously served as envoy to Ukraine. Yemen's military says 2 of its soldiers and 6 Houthi rebels have been killed in clashes in southwestern Taiz province. In a social media post, a spokesman said 10 Houthis and 3 soldiers were also injured in the government operations against the rebels. The military said clashes broke out between the two sides in the Han mountain region of the province. Houthis have not commented on the developments so far. Yemen has been beset by violence since 2014 when Houthi rebels overran much of the country, including the capital Sana'a. The crisis escalated in 2015 when a Saudi-led military coalition launched an air campaign aimed at rolling back Houthi territorial gains. Libya's internationally recognized government says 7 civilians have been killed in renewed shelling by Khalifa Haftar's forces in Tripoli. In a tweet, the government spokesperson said the shelling hit a shelter for displaced people in the Fornaj district. He said 17 other civilians were also wounded in the attack. Earlier, the military said it has destroyed a Russian-made Pantsir air defense system deployed by Haftar. It said the Pantsir system was provided by the United Arab Emirates to the key Al-Watiya air base. Turkey says it has killed 3 militants of the Kurdistan Workers Party in an operation in the southeast. Interior Ministry said terrorists were killed in an air-backed operation in Iru district. In a statement, the ministry said the operation is still underway. He said the Provincial Gendarmerie Command conducted the operation. The Interior Ministry said Turkey will continue to destroy weapon caches and shelters used by the terrorists. 134 migrant workers have died across India in last 54 days due to COVID-19 shutdown in the country. Yesterday, 30 migrant workers died and dozens of others were injured in a road accident in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. The Indian media report showed majority of these deaths occurred in the third phase of the lockdown. It said at least 96 migrants died in 19 different incidents on the roads and the railway tracks since May the 6th. Meanwhile, another 15 migrants sustained injuries after their bus overturned in Chalpaguri, West Bengal. Millions of laborers are still stuck at interstate borders facing food shortages and financial crisis. The Health Ministry has recorded over 2,800 deaths and nearly 91,000 coronavirus infections so far. An Indian community leader in New Zealand has lost his membership in the Association of Honorary Judicial Officers over Islamophobic posts on social media. An Indian diaspora newspaper in Auckland reported Kantilal Bhabhai Patel called for the economic boycott of Muslims in India. Talking to media, the vice president of association said they received a complaint and it was investigated. Vice President Anne Clark said Patel is no longer a member of the Wellington JP Association. He said the organization has referred the matter to the national body and asked them to consult with the Ministry of Justice. Earlier, several Indian nationals in the United Arab Emirates and Canada were sacked from their jobs over anti-Muslim social media posts. Spanish Coast Guards have rescued 49 migrants off the coast of Fuerteventura in the Atlantic Ocean. They were later transported to the port of Arguineguin in the island of Gran Canaria, Spain. In a statement, a Canaries government official said the migrants have been placed in mandatory quarantine. It said their dinghy was intercepted just a few miles from the island. All the rescued migrants were male and 35 of them are believed to be minors. The new measures will remain in force until May the 24th upon expiry of the emergency. Spain has gradually started lifting its stringent lockdown after the COVID-19 has killed over 27,000 people. In the DR Congo, 20 people have been killed, including women and children, in the northeastern Ituri province. A local official said 17 others are wounded and some of them have been admitted to a hospital. The official said a notorious regional militia was suspected of carrying out the latest massacre in the country. The UN says more than 200,000 people have fled violence in Ituri since March. Tensions have been rising in the region since last December with the launch of a government-led operation against armed groups. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The number of coronavirus cases in Africa has risen to over 80,000, whereas the recoveries have surpassed 30,000. In an update, Africa's Center for Disease Control and Prevention said the death toll now stands at 2,700.
North Africa remains the hardest hit region of the continent with more than 2,600 cases and 1,400 deaths. It is followed by over 23,000 cases in West Africa, more than 15,000 cases in Southern Africa, and 7,100 cases in East Africa. Surging past other regional countries, South Africa reported over 14,000 cases. Reeling behind, Egypt registered over 11,000 cases and more than 600 deaths. Ghana has 5,700 cases, Nigeria 5,600, Senegal 2,400, and Ivory Coast 2,100. In West Africa, Ghana reported 5,700 cases, while in East Africa, Sudan recorded 2,300 infections. Cameroon is the worst affected in Central Africa with 3,000 cases.
In the UK, a trial to see whether medical sniffer dogs can detect coronavirus in humans is set to begin. The dogs are already trained to detect odors of certain cancers, malaria and Parkinson's disease by the charity Medical Detection Dogs. More details in this report.
In a bid to develop a fast, non-invasive means of detecting COVID-19, British researchers are testing dogs' ability to sniff out coronavirus in non-symptomatic patients. The first phase of the trial will be led by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, along with the charity and Durham University. It has been backed with £500,000 of government funding.
In this study, we aim to determine whether people who have COVID-19 have a distinctive body odour and then train dogs to detect it. Now, we're very grateful to the UK government for supporting this very exciting research. So if this is successful and we show the same for COVID-19, this could completely revolutionise the way that we are tackling this disease.
A decade of research by Medical Detection Dogs shows that dogs can sniff out a disease at the equivalent dilution of a teaspoon of sugar in 2 Olympic-sized swimming pools.
So what we have to do, first of all, is collect samples of odour samples from people with and without COVID-19. So the way we're going to do that is by collecting using face masks, and we're asking people to wear these face masks for a few hours, and then we carefully collect those. And the other thing we're going to do is get people to wear nylon socks. That sounds a bit strange, but we know from our previous experience that this is a really good way of collecting odours from people, and it's such an easy way to do it.
One possibility is that the dogs could be used at points of entry into the country, such as airports, to detect potential carriers of the virus.
In France, Nantes' famous giant mechanical elephant has reappeared, delighting visitors. The city's theme park has reopened to the public after lifting of the country's nationwide lockdown. More in this report.
After 2 months under lockdown, France has finally begun returning to normal. Shops have reopened. Many people have returned to primary schools. Parks are also open in different parts of the country. The famous Nantes theme park has also opened, and the famous giant mechanical elephant reappeared to the delight of visitors. The mechanical elephant is an artistic, tourism and cultural project, but due to social distancing, no one is yet allowed to climb on board.
Especially for him, because it's been 2 months that he didn't see it, unfortunately. And he found out on the newspaper that it was going to restart. So this was the first thing to do, to go see the elephant.
Standing 12 meters high, as tall as 4-story house and 21 meters long, the elephant's hydraulic mechanism is controlled by a human operator. Families throng to the spectacle, eager to enjoy their city after spending 2 months cooped up at home.
We wanted to bring out the elephant because it's a flagship attraction of Nantes. It is walking around with no people on it because sanitary measures call for it.
Entry to the theme park is free, but observing measures to control the spread of COVID-19, rides and exhibition galleries remain closed.
In the US, 11 firefighters have been injured in a huge fire and explosion in downtown Los Angeles. According to the local fire department, 3 firefighters suffered critical but not life-threatening injuries. A police spokesperson said the fire was knocked down in about 2 hours. Over 230 first responders were at the scene that turned into a major emergency after a big explosion. The cause of the explosion remains under investigation as it damaged one fire truck when fell debris on its roof. No civilian injuries have been reported so far. In Bosnia, thousands have demonstrated against a mass in Sarajevo for Croatia's Nazi-allied soldiers and civilians killed by partisan forces at the end of the World War II. The mass was a replacement for a controversial annual gathering which was cancelled this year due to the coronavirus pandemic. The decision to hold the mass in Sarajevo provoked a strong backlash in the country where the memory of ethnic war in the 1990s is still fresh. It was condemned by Bosnia's Serbian Orthodox Church, the Jewish and the Muslim communities, and several anti-fascist organizations. Protesters, many wearing masks, walked through the city singing anti-fascist songs. In Poland, Warsaw police used tear gas to subdue protesters demanding a quicker end to stay-at-home orders in the country. Hundreds of protesters gathered in Old Town carrying anti-lockdown slogans. Demonstrators called for more economic support from the government and for the compensation of financial losses. Police blocked the planned march, saying in a statement published on Twitter that public gatherings are still banned under government restrictions. Officials said direct coercive measures and physical force were used in retaliation after police officers were attacked. Poland has over 18,000 confirmed coronavirus cases and more than 900 deaths. The Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus has slammed the EU declaration over the Eastern Mediterranean. The bloc urged Turkey to respect the marine jurisdiction of EU countries and their sovereignty in territorial waters. Northern Cyprus Prime Minister Ersin Tatar said the declaration is illegal and shows that EU still adopts a pro-Greek Cyprus attitude. He said the bloc ignores the rights of the Turkish Cypriot and Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. Tatar said Turkish Cyprus uses its international rights to explore hydrocarbon in the sea, which is contrary to the claims by the EU and Greek Cyprus. Displaced Syrians are observing Ramadan amid the rubble of destroyed buildings in Idlib. Along with war and poverty, they are also dealing with the coronavirus. But they say displacement is far worse than the pandemic. More in this report.
Idlib is currently home to about 4 million civilians. This includes hundreds of thousands displaced in recent years. The area has been designated a de-escalation zone in line with the Astana agreement between Turkey, Russia and Iran. Despite the towering piles of rubble and debris in the Syrian town of Atareb, people have gathered for an outdoor iftar. The location was sanitized before the meal and social distancing measures were observed.
Thank God, this is a great initiative. We are all gathered here. This is the first time we all meet after the enormous destruction in the city of Atareb caused by the ferocious bombardment.
Dozens of families and children have settled down in 2 long rows on the ground. Organizers say the iftar shows how life continues despite the ongoing conflict and fears of COVID-19.
After life slowly began returning to normal in the city of Atareb and following the return of some of the residents to this great city, we decided the Together initiative, working with the Civil Defense Forces to prepare this group iftar meal. The Civil Defense Forces helped us. We disinfected this area and laid some mats on the ground. We wanted to send a message from among the rubble that we are steadfast. God willing, we will transform the destruction caused by Bashar al-Assad into life and hope.
Displaced Syrians say the coronavirus cannot be worse than losing their homes, land and possessions.
Ramadan is difficult because of the coronavirus. The coronavirus led to indescribable price hikes, but more importantly, being displaced is much more difficult than the coronavirus. When we left our homes and lands behind, we left our olive trees, everything. When we were displaced, this was much harder than the coronavirus.
Syria's northwest doesn't have a confirmed case of the coronavirus, but doctors fear the overflowing camps would quickly turn any outbreak into a humanitarian disaster.
Angola has been hard hit by climate change. After years of drought, the country has lost most of its water resources, devastating crops. Details in this report.
Climate change has had a devastating impact on the people of Angola's Huila province. Amid the collapse of the agricultural sector, men have migrated to towns and cities in search of work. This has led to the collapse of the local family system, hitting women and girls particularly hard. One local female farmer says the ongoing famine has torn her family apart.
He left because of hunger. There was a time when he used to buy food for the children. They used to share the work, but when the hunger got bad, he decided to go.
An NGO worker explains that when men abandon their families, young girls are forced to step in as surrogate parents.
Because of families being separated or abandoned, we find a lot of families with a single parent. So it is the girls that end up helping their mothers in one way or another. So they are likely to stop studying. They first need to provide for their basic needs.
For now, the situation shows no signs of improvement. On the rare occasion that it does rain, the downpour is so violent, crops suffer even more damage.
We had been waiting for rain for 6 months without rain, and before that we had winter. When the rains came, we were so thankful, we were relieved, but they came too hard and then we had no way of tending to our crops. We were not able to get to the fields.
Women make up 80% of the people displaced by climate change. The UN warns 45 million people face a growing malnutrition in southern Africa.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.